He'll be remote also. But we can do it all remote currently.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to call the regular meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District to order. And Peter, can you do the roll call?
Sure. Epstein,
Present?
Schroeder,
Present.
Mediteranda,
Present.
Tucker. Dornberg here.
Okay. We'll move on to announcements.
Well, I'd like to welcome our one attendee, Jack Longinati, to the meeting, and please use the raise your hand function, Jack.
Okay, he has experience with that, so I'm sure that'll work well.
Good to
Okay,
see you,
does
Jack.
anyone have any corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, it's now time for comments from the audience, an opportunity to address the board on a non-agenda topic. Are there any hands raised?
No hands raised.
Okay. Written comments from the public. I didn't see any in the packet. Okay, so let's move to adoption of the consent calendar. Is there a motion to adopt?
Yeah, Dornberg so moved.
Okay, Epstein seconds. So we do a roll call, please.
Right. Dornberg, aye. Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mediteranda,
Aye.
Tucker absent.
Okay. So we're now ready for item 9, finances.
Let me skip ahead to the. Oh, looks like Chris only pulled up the agenda for me. I apologize. One moment.
And Eric, while you're doing that, I think Chris is now an attendee and needs to be promoted to a panelist, I believe.
Catch.
The correct link was sent to everyone, and
Okay, so page 24 is where we should be now.
all right.
Okay.
So first off, John caught something that I appreciated him reaching out to me. If you scroll down 3 pages, I believe, Eric, to the combined income statement, you'll note that the internal allocations, which says 6,344 for December, that wasn't done yet. So that journal entry has now been made, but it had not been made by the time these statements had been gone out. So that will be wrong in all of the following budget income statements. So I'll bring back these next month, and finance will be able to review these at their meeting with that correction. But there are a few things I didn't want to note that's beside that. So if you could scroll back up again, Eric, but I want to bring that to the forefront first. So we did have that West payment, and then the timing of it was just a little wonky by comparison to the budget. So that's 729,000. On the balance sheet, the total operating is over, and the total accounts payable is over as well. So those two wash, but I just wanted to point that out, at least for those looking at the balance sheet. And then I broke out all the other revenue, as I believe everyone was requesting. And we also saw that the 501c3 donation for that 395,000 came across in December, which is that contribution revenue. Those are the main things I really wanted to point out on here, but are there any specific questions?
Yeah, I noticed that you have the $61,000 in connection fees. Are those new?
This fiscal year, yes.
Yeah.
Mostly Timber Creek, and then a few single families.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 Timber Creek units
And
fills up the main majority of that across all funds.
it makes me want to think that we should go back and adjust those connection fees for inflation if we have time this year because
They're adjusted for inflation every year, Peter,
Every-
automatically?
automatically. Yes, every year they're adjusted by the CPI.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, but as we've talked about before, which is a good point that you've made before, once we have the master plans done, we need to revisit the connection fees in their entirety, but they are adjusted by CPI every July 1st.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes me feel a little better. Because it seems like it's been a long time
Give you an idea.
since we had any
A decade
development.
at least.
Yeah.
Amador Water Agency's connection fee for water is $21,000
Or what?
for water, just water. And
For a
we're
residential unit?
just one single residential meter is 21,000. Wastewater is more than that.
Because that might, if we, looking at our options with the fire department, if we could make more revenue on connection fees, it might help a little bit. I don't know, solve the problem, but it might help a little.
So Tommy, I had a question about the propane fund.
Please.
So if cost of goods sold is lower, we just give that benefit back to the customers. So doesn't that lower revenue by an equal amount?
No, you're assuming they hit the
Yeah,
same. They don't hit the same month.
Oh, okay.
So no. Yes, ultimately is the answer is yes, it's a wash. But from month to month, it's not consistent because we get timing of bills we get.
Okay, so it's temporarily higher and then it'll come back to,
Correct. We just gave a 2.17 cent lowering on this month's bill. I just signed the rates for that. So it just went down again.
okay.
And this is the concept that we might adjust at some point in a future propane rate study to make it aligned to the month that
Correct.
is usage, right? Like that, and that would then at that point be what Bob is saying. It should be.
It still could show up weird though, but it would ultimately, it'd still be a
It'd be
net
little
zero,
closer.
but it'd be much closer to.
Yeah.
It'd be actual to actual versus a month lag.
Okay, Tommy, you want to continue?
I think that was it unless there were questions.
Correct.
Are there any other questions for Tommy or?
John, you're on mute.
Yeah, I tend to get a couple other questions. Just I thought it'd be good to talk through the carb auction, just so everybody knows what that is.
Brandy, could you come explain how the rec purchases work? It's your annual rec purchase explanation time.
Wasn't ready for this.
You're always ready. I know you got it.
So, hi, everyone. Every year we are allocated carb credits, which we have to auction off during one of the auctions that the state holds every year. So this is, it's not just for utilities, it's across the board for industry. For us, we produce so little emissions that we always are able to auction ours off in its entirety. Tommy, I don't recall what amount of money we got from that last year.
I don't know off the top of my head.
It's a
It's a good
si-
amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the non-operating income for carb auction sales was 84.
And it's been rising over the years. We always get the same amount of credits or nearly, and we are required to auction those off. So there is no other choice. We can't do anything else with them. So what we typically do with that amount of money is we roll that over into our rec purchases, which are our renewable energy credits, which we purchase to offset the production of power, which we buy off the grid as unidentified power or unspecified power is the correct term. So every year this comes up, we usually use the October auction. It's the last one that we can get into for the year. So you'll see this credit in somewhere within $50,000 to $90,000 is the range we've been seeing. And then we take that money and put it into Rex, which we just saw Tommy Rex on this last Shell invoice. Is that correct?
131,000, correct.
For last year's long and short term rec purchases.
Correct, the combination.
Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, I just thought it was good to talk people through it. And then on the snow removal services, that's a timing issue, the 347, right? So that'll zero out or equal up true up or whatever in January.
Yeah, so
January
we've
1st.
only, as of, this is only through December 31st, so we'd only billed half of the contract. So the other half was billed in January, which will
Mhm.
show up at the subsequent month.
Okay. All good.
Thanks for looking at those again. Any
Sure.
other questions that anyone else had though?
So that covers December. Are you gonna do January preliminaries then?
I don't have January preliminaries ready for you.
Okay.
The billing went out late due to the snowstorm and a breakdown of a vehicle that our person could not get them out.
I was just reading off the agenda.
Yes,
Oh,
no, we would have
sorry.
had them, but for,
Yeah.
like I said, the storm over the weekend and a broken down car.
Okay, so cash flow is next.
Cash flow we don't have because we don't have preliminaries.
Preliminaries and cash flow go hand in hand. Unfortunately,
Oh.
because you need to use revenue from what you get from prelims.
Yeah.
To build into cash flow. All
Okay,
that will be given to finance and then they can review and they'll give it to you back
right.
next month.
Okay, so let's move on to committee charters. Then,
Of the 5 committees, 2 had changes to their charters. I included all 5. Just for reference, in case the board wanted to make any changes in them. But communications and personnel and finance are the only 2 with changes. And you can see them in the packet. And
Right.
the respective committees recommend readoption of them as presented.
does anyone have any questions on any of the charters?
Just on the communication committee, are we moving the IT related things into a different committee? Is that the proposal?
That's the
Yes, that's the
recommendation
next-
of yeah, that's the recommendation that we're making, correct.
And that's the
Okay.
next topic as well.
Yeah.
But yes, that is the bottom line.
Okay, so is there a motion to adopt the committee charters as amended?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Doug, second, please.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, Peter seconds. All right, roll call.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitteranda,
Aye.
Kuchar,
Aye.
Member Guy. It's unanimous.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 9C, IT committee proposal.
So this, again, as Doug said, this came out of communications committees to break off the IT portion. It's much more focused and not necessarily a month-to-month committee that needs to meet. I did speak to Doug yesterday and asked for his assistance. Our cyber insurance company is providing a third-party consultant to help all of their insureds. The company that they're providing to, and the one that reached out to us is KnowBe4. It's no cost to the district. But they guide us through the cybersecurity insurance process and the questionnaire, which I've been doing with Steve King, our consultant from Wire Direct, for the last couple of years. So they'll help with any questions you might have, help repopulate from last year, any changes, that sort of thing. But I did ask Doug if he could be made available and was willing to be on the IT committee to help me meet with them and go into that. We also will be having our website reviewed by our cybersecurity insurance company. So they have also reached out to me. They want to meet as well. So those are things that are coming really fast. So if we are going to break this apart, as we did with the adoption of the charters, I'd recommend that we form the IT committee, and perhaps we could, the most cybersecurity aware people could be on the committee to help. It would help it go a lot smoother.
Mhm.
And so with that, I think we'd recommend forming that. And Doug has agreed to help me on the charter. I keep telling Doug to help me on these things, and he's very nice to do so. And so we'll work on the charter as the next step, but also there's immediate things that need to start happening relative to that committee. And so staff highly recommends that we form an IT committee to deal with this that meets as needed.
Okay, I'd be happy to serve as well.
That was my hope.
Yeah, so should we have a motion to formally create an IT committee with Doug as chair and me as a member? Unless others want to compete for the position. I don't
I'm
want
dying to be on that one.
to. That's what I thought, so I just didn't want to be presumptuous.
I'll
I
make
don't understand this tech stuff, so it's up to you guys.
So
Okay.
Dornbrook moves to adopt an IT committee
Okay,
with Doug and Bob.
okay.
I second.
Okay, second by Doug. Okay.
All right,
So, sorry, that was second by Chris, just to be clear.
oh,
I'm
Chris.
sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was watching to see whose lips moved.
All right,
His lips move, but I can't hear what he says.
get a roll call is Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Minnesota,
Aye.
Kuchar,
Tucker, aye.
Norbert Guy. Oh, I got that wrong.
Is there,
Sorry.
There is a Kuchar in the valley. I know why he's making that mistake. So.
Okay.
we'll have some other votes, so you'll have a chance to redeem yourself. Okay, performance recording then, Brandy.
All right, so taking a look at electric production. For the month of January, we were a little over 1 million kilowatt hours, all purchased from the grid. Of that, 14% was unidentified system losses, which does include the Valley transformers that aren't the large transformers that you see here on your list. Bringing us to a total for the year of 9% loss. For propane.
Brandy,
Oh,
Brandy, before we
yes.
move on, I feel like when we've talked about this before, let me just say it this way. The 14% seemed higher than I would have expected, just given what you've said in the past is that, when we're using more kilowatt hours here, that's usually lower losses. So what would you attribute it to being a higher number for? How should I interpret that incurring?
It is on the high end for winter, Doug. I agree with that. We are just going to have to see in February if that comes down. I don't have an explanation for why they go a little bit back and forth. We did get to the backside. We did not get to the lake pumps. So if there was any snowmaking from the lake pumps in early January, that could be included here. But my thought is we just need to look at February and see if that number comes back down. And I will say that we, at the board's direction, asked Dave Wrightley for his thoughts on what we could do to look for electric losses. And I did finally get a report from him. So we will be reviewing that and bringing it back to the board also.
And so, thanks, Brandy. And so what would you say in February would be I'm just trying to put it in my brain to have the same question in February. So if something occurs, so what would be the percentage that you would say, wow, there must be something happening? Is it 10%, 8%, 14% again? What's kind of the trigger to you that this is something that's abnormal that we would need to really think about digging into more?
In the winter, above 12 for any sustained amount of time would make me want to look at it. Now, in some winters, things get buried and we don't get to them. So sometimes that recovers in the May, June timeframe. But I like to see a winter time number around 10%.
And what she means by that, Doug, in case you don't know, or Chris, if you haven't heard this before, we have manual reads on some of our large electric meters, and we physically cannot get to them. We cannot remotely read them. We have to physically go inspect. And so, as she said, we may not get to them until May or June. So all of a sudden that could correct the overall annual average down because we would have a huge catch-up read that we're now currently only estimating.
Right. So just to be
Could
clear,
you
there
offer an
is an
example
estimate.
of, could you offer an example of such a manual read and how is it done otherwise?
Let's do the backside.
The backside or the snowmaking lake pumps, anything that you're the lake pumps we can't get to for a big part of the winter because they don't plow that lot over there.
Sure.
So any snowmaking that's done that we can't read, we just estimate, we base on previous year's history and we take a shot at it. And then if it is more or less than that, we correct it once we can get to the meter.
And over there is the parking lot below the Caples Dam.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Familiar. Thank you.
Doug, does that answer your question?
It does. I'm just trying to think too about I don't want to ask you these same questions every year because I know how much you all enjoy us board members doing that. And I'm just trying to think of ways of knowing the orders of magnitude that are estimates of this number, right? Like, is there a easy way for, thinking about like what Tommy's been doing in terms of how showing numbers and summaries of things. I'm just wondering if there's a way of like, what percentage of this megawatt hours are we estimating versus like what risk do we have that we would have? Like, is it 0.1% or is it 5% of this is that estimated demand that we'll have to reconcile? I don't know that I don't that would help me understand, I think, a little bit better. I'm just trying to think out loud a little bit here of how can I get more insight into this without overburdening you or asking the same questions in the future, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, I don't mind the same questions. It gives me time to practice. The month to month, the estimated reads, it's not always consistent. So
Right, I can imagine,
I'm
right?
sure we
Because
could-
you can read the lake pumps in the summer, but not in the winter, right? So it varies, I'm sure, a lot over month to month.
right. Let me think about that, Doug, and see what we could come up with as far as magnitude of estimates.
Yeah, because I mean, like, just to put this in practice, right? If this chart said 14%, but you're thinking 8% of this could be due to an estimate, then I wouldn't bat an eye at this being a lot. Like, that losses wouldn't be as obviously you could go higher or I guess lower, and then we go the other way, and that could be worse than 14%. But I guess if there's an order of magnitude here that said the estimates are only plus or minus 1%, then that would say, wow, that's 13% or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's best case, and there might be something there. And I think that just helps me bound the risk, I guess, associated with it, if that makes sense.
I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, I think we should only be looking at the annual percent identified losses and not looking at month to month. I've never worked with any utility where this is done, or at least done by staff only, but not reviewed by the board monthly. So perhaps the answer is to review this annually, so this confusion doesn't occur month to month.
Well, that's certainly true for propane.
It is true for propane.
Why is it negative?
But if we, on that same note, if we look at the year-to-date column mostly, that does tend to even everything out for us because, I mean,
Sure.
if you're looking at electric, you can see we had a negative 6% loss in July, and that was unread meters from the winter that we caught up with. So it does tend to even itself out, even not.
Right.
in-
Yeah, I'm
Well,
not
then
trying to be
maybe-
overly sensitive to this, and I understand your point, Eric, but at the same time, I would hate to see like, oh wow, we've got monthly losses of 14%, whatever, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, there was a major issue. Someone's plugged into our grid and not paying for it. I don't know. Like, I'd hate to see that be as something that we just weren't paying attention to either. So I'm trying not to be overly sensitive, but I also want to be responsible. So trying to find that
Well,
middle
then
ground.
maybe a question would be, if 12% is the annual goal, it sounds like 12% is, once you take care of the seasonal estimates and fluctuations, how should we understand the 12% loss rate relative to other utility markets in the context of the fact that it's, we're a mountain resort? Is 12% a good and respectable number, I assume, right?
It's high.
It's high.
According to our consultant, it is higher than he would expect to see. Which is why we've asked him for some advice on what else we can do to look for those losses. Now, I think we've talked about before that electricity isn't something that just leaks out. So it's either unmetered usage or
Right.
wrongly metered usage. So we've taken some steps in the past to try to find that, but we're looking to our consultant for more advice.
Or it's conversion to heat.
Or it's conversion to heat, and there is some of that
Right.
because you see a lot of transformers making big holes in the snow.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, so we briefly mentioned propane. It's back to a positive loss, which always is good to see. We have 2% for the year, so we're right on track for propane losses for the year. Moving on to water. For January in water, we had a big January month, more than we expected to meter. Of that, we had a 14% loss for the month, 14% for the year. We expect to see 15% in water, so this is right in line with that. And then lastly, wastewater. At the plant, we metered almost 2 million gallons coming in. Of that, 12% was inflow and infiltration, I&I. So 28% for the year is not water coming down someone's drain or flushing toilets. You can see that in January, that number came down quite a bit. It was very cold. We didn't see much runoff at all in January. And so with that, I've included our charts and the aquifer level sheet for the board's review. But I don't have anything else to report unless there are any questions.
Except for.
Brandy, on the water usage tab on page 655.
Yeah,
what's-
I just asked her to talk about that, Doug. This goes directly to the Herb Keeney usage. That was the broken water main and then the forgiveness of it in the subsequent in a subsequent month. That's what the spike is, but it was actually water produced. And
These
then,
charts represent build
bill. So when we
amount, so.
Yeah.
And if you get a credit, then it's in that, so that's why it shows up. It'd be a different chart to try to show this as actual production.
right, you wouldn't have the negative. You still have the giant positive in July, but would not have the negative in September.
Right.
Just because for the next 4 years, this line is going to show up on there, right? In this way, I would recommend putting a little footnote or something just on this page. So every month in the next 4 years, we can just refer back to this was a special exception that was approved at whatever board meeting it was, just so that we don't have to ask that and be surprised by it.
I would be happy to do that. Thank you for the.
We could also adjust it and net it out so it doesn't show.
Good. Yeah, whatever you want to do. Either way works for me. but-
I'm
I
happy. to
think
put
you'd
it
rather
in.
note it because it was actually produced. So we
Yeah,
those
okay.
stuff.
Either way works. Okay, thank you, Brandy.
Thank you.
All right, so next item, energy efficiency rebates.
Oh, yes. So we've been, this is one of the things that goes back to the public benefits charge that we were required to do once we discovered we had not been doing what we were supposed to have been doing and collecting it. So we started collecting it. It's 2.85% that we're required to do on our net revenue. So far we started that with the new rate study, and we've collected $81,000. It's roughly 40,000 per year that we collect. There are very specific things we can use the PBC funds for, and they're listed obviously in the staff report. But this one deals with energy efficiency rebates only, which is one of the permissible uses. So a rebate program. And so there were, there's a lot of questions in here. Well, first we reviewed quite a few other utilities to see what their programs were. And I think we reviewed over 30 California municipal or publicly owned utilities to see how their programs were. And those results were summarized in this section, along with recommended program guidelines. So planning's noodled on this for a bit. There is consensus on the program guidelines. These are consistent with most every other public utility in the state. Maybe just stop there and ask if there's any questions on program guidelines. And if there's not, then maybe we could the board could consider adopting those guidelines. And then we can move on to the next step. But this has to do with, basically how the program is kind of set up and administered, who's eligible for it, what documentation is required, building permits, installation verification, limitations, et cetera.
Yeah, the one question that came up, and I'm not sure it's really part of the guidelines, but I'll bring it up now. And if you want to defer till later, you could. But
okay,
would we have an exposure of having more rebates than public benefit charge proceeds?
We could have that exposure. I do address that later on. So maybe can we just set that one aside, and I'll explain how I propose to not over not go red in the bank.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments then on the guidelines? Not hearing any, they seem reasonable.
I mean, sorry, I just had to get off mute there. In terms of the installation verification, I appreciate that that's in there. What's the general like, how is that typically, is that spot checked, audited always? Like, what's the typical approach that you would imagine taking towards something like that? Does it depend on the clients?
I would not say it depends on the clients. I mean, I'm treat all customers as, equitably as I can and equally as I can. But yes, it would probably involve periodics, give us, give us pictures of your installation, and does that match the picture of the receipt you gave me for the dishwasher? And then, maybe periodically random spot check on newly installed. I mean, we're only talking, we're talking, depending on which way the board decides to go with the program, we're only talking, couple dozen installations per 6-month period. So one spot check maybe per semi-annual. It would just depend on how the program's going and how customers are doing. So.
Yep. And then just on the application window, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the if it happens once every 6 months, I just want to make sure that I'm clearly understanding when could someone apply. Like, when do you no longer become eligible, or like, are you always eligible to apply? So if I installed some, suppose that the windows are every 6 months in January and July or something like that, and I install something in February, how long or when am I able to apply for the rebate that I have installed successfully before July, let's say?
Gotcha. So there's kind of two questions in there. One I'm going to defer to later because that is a talking or a question that has to be answered. But the way I've seen the other ones go, and this kind of answers John's question as well. Basically, an application period opens up, and I'm just going to make random numbers up, so don't hold me to anything. 20 people apply for various things that use the $20,000 that the board set aside for semi-annually. So say it was 40,000 annual, and the 20th application comes in and we're out of money. We would stop taking applications. Those people would have a reservation on that money. And when the installation was complete, they'd provide proof, and then they would be provided the rebate, and they would have 6 months to complete that installation. And if they didn't, again, this is a later component, it would go back into the next 6-month period into the pot. And that way we would not overextend it, to go to John's point, and we would keep track of, hey, we've just run out of money with this application. We will hold no more applications this period. Does that answer your question, Doug?
I think it partially answers my question, but there's also an aspect of, suppose I am a customer who doesn't closely read my newsletter from the KMPUD, and I, again, give my example of installed in February, but the next available is July. I didn't know that it was available in July to apply for this rebate program, and maybe I miss it in January. Like, when am I no longer even able to apply, even if I did something?
I understand your question. So the one thing that was consistent across 90% of the other things is there's no retroactive application allowed. So if
retroactive means
if you installed something last year, you can't apply for funding to do something you installed previously. This is only going forward. This is not a retroactive program. It couldn't be, because where would you stop? 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
Okay, but that's, I think it's still slightly different than what I'm trying to understand. But like, suppose in February 2025, the program's running and up and running. In February 2025, January and July are dates. I'm making that up. But February 2025, someone installs something, and they didn't know that they could apply for rebate in July 2025, and they missed that window. Are they eligible to apply in January 2026? It's not retroactive in the sense of it's not before the program started, because the program is now started. It's more of,
right,
how many windows do you have,
right,
to, until we say, you know what, it's too old. You did this 5 years ago. You did it in 2025, but now it's 2030. We're not going to allow you to apply for that, or so. I don't know if that's true. I'm just asking. That's the question I'm asking.
Yeah. Okay. So my answer is the same. Most of the other utilities do not allow a retroactive application. So even if they installed it in February and never bothered to apply in January, it's, they're just not eligible.
So you're
That's
only
summer.
eligible in the next window, the immediately next window that is available, is what you're saying.
They would
to
have to
apply.
apply, they would have to apply, be approved, then they could proceed with that project if they wanted reimbursement. Otherwise, this program becomes monstrous to administrate. And there's no way we could do this on a staff of 18.
So it's pre-installed. You apply before you install.
Correct.
The only other thing we might consider is at the deadline for applications, there's more applications than there is money, then do a pool, some sort of random drawing for them. That would be the only other way I could think of.
Yes.
Or
All of them
proportional.
are first come, first served in the order that which they were received.
Okay, and the definition of received is the stamp on the email or the stamp
When
if they
staff, when
delivered
staff
it?
receives it,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Whether it was paper copy or whether they dropped it in the PO box and we stamped, or the
Mhm.
drop box, or whether they sent
Right.
send
Okay,
an email. We'll make it available so people could drop it in the Dropbox or could use postal service or could, submit it electronically. We'll have a form. That's part of the creation of what previously adopted where the guidelines is. We'll create a form for all of this that'll explain that all.
okay.
I guess what I'm just trying to think about is the timing of some of these things. I could see what you're saying if there was a completely rolling process where you get pre-approval or whatever, but it seems like, if I wanted to buy, some appliance or whatever, I would, and it's February, again, January and July are the periods. It sounds like what you're saying is you have to, if you want to get money back from the district, you would have to wait until July to apply, get approval, and then you install it if you get the rebate. You couldn't install it in February, keep all your receipts, have your pictures, and then say, look, I installed it. It's now July. Look, I did this,
Right.
here. And I'm just wondering, does that seem, again, if you had a rolling application process, I don't see a big issue with that. But if you're basically saying, in extremes, 5
Well,
months wait type of thing.
The problem that I think that introduces, Doug, is that a lot of these are gonna be retrofit because something broke, right? So my propane water heater broke and I need to replace it, right? And
That's right. You might not have a time to wait. Yeah.
Yeah, so I couldn't wait. That's kind of
Yeah, that would be a common use case is
it's a typical scenario.
I think.
so I guess that's my point.
I would say for $20,000 a year, there's only so much we can do.
Eric, could you repeat, why is it that there are only 2 windows during the year as opposed to rolling? I missed that logic.
That was, so this was a summation of what all the other utilities do, and that was
Oh.
consistent across the board.
Okay, so that's
I mean,
one answer.
otherwise, every month you'd offer $1,000. I mean, you'd be constantly applying, being shut out and then trying again. I mean, it's just a constant
I see.
process, which doesn't,
Yeah.
for $20,000 administrated per year,
Mm,
that wouldn't be a very efficient management.
right.
And I guess, and just to be clear, I'm not questioning the 2 times a year aspect of this. I think that's a very reasonable thing to do from a staff perspective. What I'm wondering is, could we relax some of the time stamping of purchase in the sense that like you have, plus or minus 6 months or something like that. So you get a window or two, like you could purchase something in February. It's efficient and you apply for it. And, as Bob said, maybe you have to go into a lottery and maybe it's deferred a few months, but you don't have to wait until July to get pre-approved to get that money back, even though you did all the same things as someone who did that process. And so I'm just trying to ask if there's a way to relax some of that aspect of this so our customers will be able to be taking action at any time during the year and still be able to apply for it. And they haven't like missed the window if they did it in February, using my example.
Well, I think we'd be the first utility to do that. And you would never know whether the incentive was the reason why they did it or just it was on, they hoping it would go on sale after they bought it. Just kind of the facetious way of describing that scenario. I'll just say, I think for this small amount of money, starting out with something extra complicated, I don't know if that would serve us very well.
Question for Eric and Bob. Is this something that the board will, as I understand it, I mean, this program has come out of the planning committee, where it's been discussed a lot there and then developed by Eric and staff. But is it something we're going to vote on at this meeting, or does the planning committee and staff work on it one more round and it gets decided next meeting?
No, it's done with planning. It's the board making the decision on the recommendations.
Oh, so we expect to decide on this today.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if there's enough votes. It's
Okay,
being brought for a vote today.
thank you.
I had a question about the table, the recommended rebate amounts. What would someone do? What would somebody do to the refrigerator?
Could we hold on that one, John? I'm happy to get to it, but I just want to get the guidelines done or not. Because if we don't have the guidelines, there's no point in moving forward. Because the rest, then we have to revisit the entire guidelines before we can do anything else.
Sure.
So basically, Bob, to say back your example, someone says, I may want to purchase something because an appliance might go on sale in the next 6 months. They could facetiously apply for this in July, may or may not buy it. And if they don't buy it, it just goes back in the fund and they could not use it if it doesn't go on sale or something like that. I mean, that's
Well,
what
I was using a different example, but yes, but what you said is correct.
I mean, I guess
I think Doug, from our perspective, from staff's perspective, spending 20,000 in staff time on 20,000 in rebates doesn't seem like the wisest use of funds. We're 18 people. The more cumbersome we make this process, the more money it takes. And the money tree has fully been shooken. So there's nothing left.
I appreciate that. I'm not trying to create more work. I just wouldn't, in my mind, I wouldn't think that having a application timestamp or an installation timestamp that is not a pre-reservation wouldn't be that much more work. But if you're telling me it is, then I will yield and we can start with this. And I would say then we can revisit it and see what the community says. And I think this would then have to go to the communications team because I think in other instances, I will say other rebate programs that I've participated in for thermostats or light bulbs that I've purchased, it's ex post, like you buy it and then you show a receipt and then you apply and then you get money. So I don't know I mean, I don't know. That's been my experience with these programs. So I think people might be surprised and frustrated when they buy something and they buy an energy efficient appliance and then they install it and they're like, great, I know KMPUD has this program. And then all of a sudden we say, nope, sorry, you didn't pre-approve this and you didn't reserve it, even though they did all the right things. I could see that being a frustrating customer experience. And I just don't want to walk into that, I guess is my point.
Agreed. So would somebody, presumably Eric, walk us through what happens in that use case of someone in February, let's say, who, because of a broken heating system, wants to or considers buying a heat pump, or the same analogy with a oven or refrigerator that goes out, but let's take the heat pump. It goes out, it's February. How should they think about this rebate? What is the process that they go through if they have to fix a problem urgently? What do they do?
So I believe this is an energy efficiency rebate program, not my appliance broke rebate program, right?
Right.
Okay, I guess that's true. But now they're trying to decide which product to buy, and they want to buy the heat pump because they've heard there might be a subsidy.
Well, if they heard there might be a subsidy, they know what the program is, right?
And they would know that the program is that you have to wait until July, in my example, to apply for it, get money, and then you won't install it until you've applied and gotten the money.
Just to play
later down the
devil's
year.
advocate, Doug, what if somebody buys something, installs something that doesn't meet a requirements? Like, well, I thought I was doing your program and I knew, I did it in February and I didn't realize I had to do that. And then we're going to get, those complaints to the board. So, try to
I'm
make
just
this
saying,
program
yeah.
as simple and as logical as possible. If we want to deal like, with your rebate example, Doug, with PG&E with 10,000 employees, if we want to have a fully dedicated person to this, yeah, we can make this as complicated as we want.
I understand. Let me just say this. I will support moving forward with what's proposed. I will just say that I think the communications of this, like we had, I think this should be added to the communications committee agenda. We'll talk about more of that in the future agenda item in terms of some of the things we're talking about. But I do think that this has to be advertised as like big bold letters. You need to pre-approve for this. Like this is not an ex post purchase rebate. This is a pre-approval rebate, and I think that just has to be really well communicated if we're going to do this this way. I think that will be
Agree.
important.
And
Yeah.
it sounds like the answer to my question is that if you're in February and you need to replace because of a broken system, you'd better not count on getting the subsidy. Is that correct? Because you got to buy it now, install it now in February, and you're not going to qualify in July if those are the dates that we go with. Do I hear this right?
Yes.
That example is correct. But again, I think a person who has an emergency, an energy rebate is typically for someone who doesn't have an emergency. Like the purpose of this program, I think Eric said this before, or Bob said it before, is not necessarily to have an emergency situation. It could be if you had it in July and you just happen to coincide with our windows, maybe it'll work out for you. But the point of these programs is to encourage people to become more energy efficient, not necessarily to fix
And
things
yet,
that are
as
already
we
broken.
said, the biggest purchase on our list of items is not the fridge or the oven, it's the heating system. And as John said earlier, the most likely scenario, the most common scenario is that it breaks, you got to fix it, and you got to fix it now. And so it seems a shame that given that when the person's at the decision point, the subsidy becomes irrelevant because of the way we are going to set up the program.
Yeah, and
In your
it's
scenario.
likely- It's likely the conversion will be more expensive, right?
Right. Yeah.
If I go from a propane water heater to an electric one, I may have to have an electrician come in and run a higher amperage line over to that location. Obviously, a propane furnace to a heat pump would be a big step up in cost, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, John, I doubt anyone's gonna do fuel switching in an emergency situation. It's something I'm near the end of life. I've been told by my installer that maybe it'll go another year or so, and now
Yeah.
I want to consider it.
I kind of don't agree with that, but yeah, I understand we don't want to overspend on administration of this, but I'm pretty sure I could get an electric water heater in an emergency situation. It just probably cost me more, but I kind of like Doug, I'll roll over on this and try not to make the administrative cost too high.
And I would say that we should see how this works, and we can always revisit this. And I think, especially since a new program, I think we should plan to see how this works and revisit it at some point in the near future.
Yeah, I think we'll report with some regularity semi-annually, we'll report on a number of applications, types, that sort of thing. That would be important to do, I think. I agree.
Okay,
All right, cool.
thanks.
So did you want to approve that section, or do you need a vote on that, or you want to just move forward?
I think if we approve that section, then we can move on to we have two more sections after that.
Okay,
Okay, is there a motion to approve the first section on the program program guidelines?
Yeah, Dornbrook, I'll move to do that.
Okay, is Bob all second?
Okay, Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
aye,
Nitzaranda,
Aye.
Tucker,
Aye.
I got it right.
Yeah, you did.
And Doorbrook, aye.
Okay,
Okay, so the next comes in a series of questions about the rebate conditions. There was definitely some disagreement between staff and the planning committee on this. So one thing I would like to highlight at the beginning with the rebate amounts, which was John's question, just to give an example, if we were to utilize the planning committee's recommended rebate amounts and someone were to apply for all of them, they could take, we would have 12 people take all the rebates and no one else be available. So I want to preface it with that as we start considering how much we want to annually give to this program. So the first question is, so as I said before, PBC funds can be used for four things. One of them is the low income program that's being considered by planning committee now, which the board has approved the needs assessment, which has already been completed. The other is the planning committee has voiced a lot of different ideas, different projects that they would like to see funding for. One of them that comes to mind is the helping offset some of the costs for the HOAs to do fuel switching on their big boilers sort of thing. And we have, that is a topic that planning's considered. We've reached out to all the large propane users to ask them if they would consider talking to the planning committee. We've had actually a relatively positive response. 3 customers have got back to us. And one of those is Vail, and they are, a good bulk of the 13 customers that make up 50% of our biggest users. So good response. That'll be coming in a future planning committee meeting to meet with them, hopefully March. That's the target anyway. So all that being said is how much of the annual PBC do we want to use and how much of the built up reserves do we want to use? So the planning committee recommended using 40 to 50. And again, this is amalgamation of planning committee because a lot of people had numbers all over the place, but this is kind of where the average fell. 5% to low income, 25% reserve, and 70% for rebates annually. Staff disagrees with that. We believe the initial 40,000 is a good target, which is 50% of the rebates. We agree with 5% low income, but we recommend 20% reserve and then 25% for all the other projects that planning committee said they wanted to use it for, but would be eliminated if we did their recommended percent allocation. So it's up to the board to decide how you want to spend the PBC funds. As Doug said about the program, this can change from year to year. So the board can revisit it if the theoretical study uses are not being utilized. Well, shove more money over to energy rebates, or we have more people come in that qualify as low income, put more money into that. It can be revisited annually. This isn't the end all be all, but this is the recommendation to start from planning committee and staff.
but the main difference here is staff's recommending that 25% be held for that's not pre-allocated to specific programs.
Correct.
So that could be the learning portion of the money.
Right. The geothermal study that Ann Floor mentioned, or the heat pump switchover for the large condominium units, or all those studies. It's not cheap to hire a mechanical engineer to come in and do all that for you. So that was one of their ideas.
So what's the reserve percentage? Like what would that be? What are we reserving for in that
In case something big came up that was more, I think that's more, if something really big came up that the district wanted to throw a lot of money at, like this geothermal idea. I mean, that would be a huge undertaking to do something like that, to study that. So it would be for the bigger projects, the bigger asks of, permissible use of the PBC fund.
But we have $80,000 right now, and these are both proposing $40,000 to $50,000 initially. So aren't we going to have $40,000 of reserve, even if we did one of either of these 2 bullet points?
Yes.
And so the idea is that we still need to continue to fund that reserve with, $10,000 a year, $8,000 a year, something like that.
Yes. I mean, if every multifamily HOA decided they wanted to do a study, 40,000 plus 20% plus another 8,000, 48,000 is going to go really, really not far. Or we could choose not to fund studies at all, and then we could go with the planning committee's recommendation. But these schemes come up with regularity to use the PBC funds, so I don't think they're going to go away.
As chair of the planning committee, I advocate going low to zero on reserves. We're only talking $80,000 here. If there are big studies that come up that are not envisioned today, I have a hard time getting worried about that. Whereas I do favor the projects like the large condo conversion discussions and consulting assistance we might give to those. So the 25% that is in the planning bullet, I think of that as being set aside set aside for the HOA fuel switching discussions. And if the HOA fuel switching discussions gobble all that money up, then that's just fine. We have nothing left for what might happen in the months ahead. I think that's the sentiment of the committee as well.
Peter, do you want to?
Well, I think we are limited in funds, and I think that our focus is trying to get people to switch from propane. So that would require planning. So I concur with Chris.
Can you clarify then, Chris? You said zero reserve, but this says 25%. So I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, you're right. And I should have perhaps commented on this document prior to the meeting. But what I'm saying, when I see 25% reserve, I basically mean, or I interpret that to mean that 25% is to fund the HOA or the fuel switching discussions. And I don't really think of it as a reserve for things unknown. I think of it as reserved for the HOA fuel switch conversations that we have launched. So I would label it differently. I'd say 25% for fuel switching discussions. The planning committee does, the members of the committee who are not board members do, they are on the high side of dollar incentives, whether it's a fridge or an HVAC. They have lobbied for numbers larger than, we'd previously been discussing. And so we'll get to that, I think, later in Eric's document here, but they go high and maybe a little too high. But whatever we're not spending on the individual incentive programs for HVAC and ovens and fridges, I think we should be spending on the fuel switching discussions. And we're only talking about 80,000, not 800,000. So it's not as if we'd be holding a ton of money back in reserve anyway.
Well, then, but I guess what I would say is it seems like there's a math formula here that would solve some of this, and that if you what sounds like what you're saying is there's no reserve that you want to make for future projects that are unknowns. That's what I think the staff
That is what I'm saying. Yes,
the 25% of other permissible PBC uses would be zero.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
as the new guy here, if I don't know what I don't know. Eric mentioned there could be something big down the road we can't envision. But this $80,000, and yes, it grows every year a little bit, but $80,000 is not a great a deep pocket to turn to if there's some big project that confronts us down the road. I don't see the point of carving reserves out of just $80,000. We got it.
Right. And I guess I'd also say that, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but like if we wanted to do a project that was a geothermal study, it's not like we're limited to only using PBC funding. Like that would be a funding source. We could fund that out of a budget process that we would go through as a board. Right? It's not like we can only fund this through a PBC funding.
That's correct.
Okay.
But I also refer you to my shaken.
I know. I understand rates would have to pay for it, but I am just saying that like it's not like I'm not trying to create new money. I'm just trying to say that like if the board was like, this is so important that we have to fund a geothermal study,
Right.
we don't have enough money in the PBC because we've allocated it to rebates and we've allocated it to, low income programs or whatever. But if the board just said like, this is super important, we could budget for it and the community would pay for it, but that's what would be the reality of it, right?
Yes, you could raise rates to do that, yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I understand that's what I'm saying. I guess I just want to be clear. It's not like we have, we have money that comes through by law that we should invest back into our community. It is $40,000 a year. We've collected it for 2 years. What do we do with it? And I just want to make sure it's clear that like, if there is some unknown super high priority thing that we do not know about today that we should do, it doesn't have to only come out of this fund. Is my point. It would be nice if it did, because then we don't have to raise rates, but that's what this reality is. So that gets me to the point of like, we could spend more of this or less of this, just it depends on risk profile, basically. Like how risky do we want to be in terms of unknown projects that might come up that we might want to save money for to fund? Like, are we risk seeking or risk averse in terms of what we think might come up in the future as a board? Like, what do we think? Do we think there is an unknown study or an unknown use that of valid PBC use funds as staff has recommended that could help us pay for it quickly and easily because we have money there to do this as opposed to budgeting and raising rates? Do you agree with that general assessment, Eric?
Yes, I mean, like for the third time, yeah, absolutely. It's correct. We could do all that. That is correct.
I mean, I guess what I would say is from my personal perspective, then I know from working with planning in the past, there are lots of ideas and lots of concepts, and I have some that aren't even listed here about, even having residential customers getting energy audits and things like that are, I think, good valid uses of PPC funds potentially that it makes sense to me to have some money and flexibility left over to allow us to pivot without having to raise rates. Like that would be, in my opinion, maybe I'm just more risk averse than, I don't know, in that regard.
So what are you saying? You want to delay spending money and build up a reserve?
I'm saying that
I-
it's, go ahead, Bob.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Deb.
No, I was saying to some extent, yes, but not in orders of magnitude of like 50% of it. I think we should spend money today to help people do what they want to do and to be more efficient. It's a balancing act. And so there's a spectrum that we have to decide as a board. Is it zero in terms of what we do in terms of reserve to have opportunities to fund things that might come up? Or is it 100% and we don't spend any money? We just keep it sitting here until one big project happens. I think all of us are agreeing it's not 100% goes into reserves, but is it greater than zero? And if it is, what is it?
So my view on this is we have a small amount of money. We want to get started. Staff has looked at a lot of other programs and said this is kind of a reasonable starting point with some flexibility, which is how I think of the reserves. I regret that we don't have reserves in other areas, snow removal, for example. So I think starting here, running it for a year, seeing what we learn is I just don't know how to argue that this should be 5% different or that. I'm happy to take a recommendation and just see what we learn over a year.
To be clear on the difference between these two scenarios, planning versus staff, how much money goes into the subsidy program under planning versus staff? It says 50% rebates, so that's 50% of 40K, or is it
Right.
$20,000 is the amount that staff proposes to spend on the rebate program,
Right.
whereas the committee proposes to spend 70% of 40, 28,000.
Right.
That's right.
Um,
And we might learn in the first thing that nobody
Yeah.
applies, or we might
Yeah.
learn that it's overly
Overly
popular
subscribed. Yep.
or whatever, and then we might adjust.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, again, as head of planning committee, I think I defer to staff recommendation then.
Okay,
I think we should just, someone should make a motion and just somewhere in between, maybe there's a happy medium. Doug was kind of edging towards a motion, so maybe he has one he wants to make.
Yeah, I mean, I'll motion for the staff recommendation at this point. I think we start with that and we see what subscriptions look like in terms of applications. And I think we just have, as I said before, we will need to revisit this. It will not be perfect the first time through. I guarantee you, but I don't want us to stop and lose momentum, you know, in
I'll-
an effort to be perfect about this. So I think I'm okay with the staff. I have motion for the staff recommendation here.
I'll second that and simply comment that whether it's reserve or the 25% that's listed here for other permissible uses, as I said before, I'm not a big advocate for creating reserve, but 20,000 sounds like an appropriate number. Yeah, so I'll second the motion.
okay.
All right, ready to vote?
All right, so what we're voting for is to take this item, which it says 9C there, but it's really 9E.
90.
Oh, that's an E, sorry. And accepting staff's recommendations for each of the items.
Okay,
I think it's
That's
just the first one, though.
Well,
even talked
we
about
haven't
the
discussed the other ones. Hold on. I was
we're
saying,
just
my
doing
motion
the
was
first
for,
one.
what says
Yeah,
what
just the
percentage of
first
PBC
one.
funds is just the,
others.
that was
Spent
my
half an
motion.
hour to end up
All
where
right.
we started.
Okay,
But we had a
Epstein,
good discussion.
Schroeder,
I,
Minutes-Randa,
Aye.
Tucker,
Aye.
Nordberg, aye. It's unanimous.
So the second one is, do we want to target a number of participants or just do it on a first come, first served basis? So the planning committee wanted to target 30 to 50 people at 500 to 1,000 and one commercial. And then another person said 20 to 30 residential with 1 to 5 low income. So it was a little bit all over the place, but as you saw later in their staff report, that if everybody could apply for everything, you would get 12 people. So there's a conflict in the desire. So that's why staff recommends we just do a first come, first served of the initial 40,000 and the 20,000 annually on the energy efficiency.
I
And
agree
then-
with
oh.
staff. I agree with staff recommendation, but my read on those planning committee numbers is those were projections or guesstimates on how many people might or could or would likely apply and qualify for the program. So I don't think the planning committee has a strong, insistence that money be channeled for residential or channeled for, I think the committee is very comfortable with your first come, first served recommendation, and I support that.
Can I ask a question on the low income aspect of this? Because I'm now reading this again. I want to make sure I'm very clear in that the 40,000, the PBC funding can go into a low income program, which would be maybe a rate program.
Separate from this, correct.
Which is separate from this. And so I want to make sure,
Yes.
like, when you're saying what we just voted on the first percent, I read that as 5% is for the low income rate program.
That is
of-
correct. You're
now we're
100%
talking about-
correct.
Okay, good. And so then the low income aspect of this second bullet point is taking those customer base, allowing them to apply for the energy rebate portion of the dollars early.
Early, correct.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure we're
Exactly.
really clear
You
on
got
that.
it exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly.
I support that. That's fine.
And it was just a recommendation that it could be 4 weeks. I just
I
had to
understand.
throw some at best guess in there. We probably have, based on the survey results, 2 to 3 people that would qualify for low income. So
I mean, I think the other approach is what Bob would say is you open a window for 1 month for everyone. If someone is identified and verified as a low income customer, they're the first of the line. And if whoever is at the end of the line after them, and they could all be fulfilled, then everyone gets fulfilled. And if they can't, then it's a lottery. That's another way of considering this.
I would be loath to do lottery because I can hear the accusations of rigging now. So, but I do take your point that yes, we could prioritize low income instead of giving them 2 weeks early. That would achieve the exact same result.
Right.
But either one would work in my mind with no additional real extra effort for staff.
So
So
if low
either way
income
is fine with
applies,
me.
the application date is always considered the first available date.
Yeah. Either way is fine.
That would be fine. That
So maybe
it's a little simpler.
yeah. So that a motion, Doug?
Restate exactly what Bob, I just make sure I heard what Bob that added there. I think it was Bob that
If
said that.
a low income person applies during the period, their application date will be considered the first,
Front of the line.
the front of the line of the period, regardless of when they submitted it.
But they still might not receive money if they apply towards the end of the period and they've been approved and, you know,
No,
Right.
regardless of when they apply, the application date will be moved forward to
Yeah,
the start of the
we'll give
period.
the answers at the end, at the close
I
of the
see.
application
Okay,
period.
so the application, okay, thank you. That was what I was missing. Okay, yes.
I heard it. I got you.
Yeah, sure, yes. I think that would achieve the same outcome with less overhead. Right? I mean, you don't have to open, you don't have to have two different windows, you have.
They're
one
gonna
window.
be, yeah, they're gonna basically be a wash, and I'm like I said, I'm fine with either way.
Okay, so I would
think-
say I would motion for the first come, first served on the pool. Low income customers who are verified and identified get moved to the earliest possible date. And they get fulfilled before everyone else. But otherwise, first come, first serve.
Or should you just say you have priority over other requests?
That's another way of saying the same thing.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, that's just more straightforward to me
Sure,
than date adjustment.
sure.
Okay.
So I would motion what John had clarified to mean as get priority over other customers, assuming that everyone is fulfilled at the end of the month, so you know when everyone has applied. We'll go from there.
All right, second.
All right, Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Uh,
Duker,
Aye.
Robert, aye.
Okay, this one, there was consensus, should there be a cap on the funding? So I think we've established that with the 50% and the initial amount. So first come, first serve, so, you know, and if the supply exceeds the demand, or when the demand exceeds supply, we could act as reservations on the rebates, and then if they're incomplete, then the money or unused, then the money would go over to the next pool, and then they could reapply. I think that would, if someone applied and tried to, got something ordered but couldn't get a contractor to install it, I think that would be a case where you could roll them to the next period because they were in process and they were previously approved. I would think that would be fair and not onerous in terms of administration. So I think really this one, I don't think needs action unless there's any clarity, but I think now that we've set the percent caps, that tells us how much money we have available. And obviously I'm not gonna issue more rebates than I have money for.
Okay.
Doug, does that make sense to you?
it does.
Cool. Everybody else, any questions, or think we can move off of that one then? Should new construction be eligible? There's consensus on this. No, there's already high energy standards and that they're required to meet regardless of this program. So no one felt they should be eligible. Board agree on that?
Yes.
Yep.
Should probably have a motion on that though, just to close that loop.
So moved.
It's
Second.
been moved and
That was,
seconded that new construction is not eligible.
Correct.
Who seconded it?
John.
John,
Okay. Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitchell,
aye.
Duker,
Aye.
Thornbrook, aye.
Well, the next question is, should conversion from propane to electric, for the above, except for refrigerators, be required? No, we agreed on this. Though electric to electric should require energy efficiency improvement as measured by a third-party objective criteria. And there's 3 that I found used throughout the state, which is SEER, EAR, and Energy Star.
Mhm.
SEER and EAR is mainly a heating, ventilation, air conditioning requirement on those units, whereas Energy Star is more of an appliance. But their objective third-party criteria, the district would just apply what they use. And so the committee does recommend, and staff does recommend, that if you want to improve your 20-year-old refrigerator to a new one, you should be eligible for this program, for example.
Okay.
Somebody want to make a motion that we will allow electric to electric?
I guess my
Thornbrook-
question would be, Peter, is there a, when you say an improvement, there could be a small improvement or a large improvement? Are we going to have a
Yes.
measure of improvement that is a minimum amount of improvement included?
Yes, and there's some pretty consistent literature from our sister agencies that provide that guidance. And again, it all goes back to SEER, EAR, or Energy Star. And we would basically mimic what most of the state is doing. But yes, there's some measurable improvement, not a de minimis improvement.
Okay, so then I would
I-
motion this to say then that that this has a minimum efficiency improvement as measured by some third party.
Right.
That's what I
Regardless of energy source.
Yeah,
Correct.
okay, that makes sense.
I second Tucker.
Okay,
Okay,
roll call.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Tucker,
Aye.
Thornbrook, aye.
All right,
Okay,
well,
the cap.
getting down on the last ones, the last few here. Should there be cap on rebate application recurrence per equipment type? So how often could you replace your water heater and improve efficiency? Not across all things. Your water heater doesn't have anything to do with your refrigerator in terms of rebates. It would only be apples to apples. So there wasn't consensus at planning, but staff recommends 10 years, and planning said, some said 5, some said 10.
And just what's the justification for 5 or 10? I guess I'm just trying to think of like when you think they would normally die, when they would
Yeah, it was yes.
normally be more efficient available. Because I mean, again,
I think it's a combination of the two, Doug. I think it's a combination of life expectancy of the equipment and technology advancements in the equipment that goes back to your minimum efficiency improvement at the previous motion.
Right.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a motion for 10 years then? Is the standard?
It seems
Motion.
reasonable.
Motion to support staff recommendation, Tucker.
Okay, so that's a motion. A second, please.
Dornbrook seconds.
Okay, roll call.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Tucker,
Aye.
Thornbrook, aye.
Okay, then last
Last one on the
two
program,
items, yeah.
at least the program parameters. Should there be an annual cap for a single customer to how much in rebates a single customer can receive? The planning committee said no. Staff recommends that yes, there should be $1,000 per customer per year, cumulative of all rebates. So if they did a hot water heater and a refrigerator, that would be added together, and it could not exceed $1,000. This gets the most money to the customers. We don't know what the number of customers is going to be, so this allows the most participation. And if we don't have participation, as been said by multiple board members previously, then we can change the parameters of the program. But initially, I think we should open it to as many customers as possible and not potentially put it in the hands of just 12.
Okay, and what this means, if somebody already had $950 and applied for a heat pump water heater, they could get $50.
Correct.
Okay,
Or they could wait a year and apply for a more full amount.
that's
Eric,
correct.
I forget, was the sentiment of the committee strong on this one? It didn't register
Yes.
with me, was it?
Yes, it
Oh.
was. Yep.
Well, my only reluctance to support staff recommendation is just respect for the committee, but I missed how strong the views were there from.
There were three, if you go back to the final email, that thread between, started with Preston, then Ann Fleur, then Kiskinen, there were three that did not want caps. And that's, Eric Rickert did not weigh in on that issue. And I
Oh.
think at the committee, he was supportive of caps, but I'm not positive on that.
I support caps. I just want to respect the committee because we've gone against their views on several things, but so be it. So motion to support staff recommendation.
Okay, is there a second?
Yeah, Dornberg, I'll second that.
Okay, roll call.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
I,
Edith,
Aye.
Tucker,
Aye.
Dornberg, aye, it's unanimous.
And the final one, coming in the home stretch. I lied to you, Bob. We weren't going to finish by 3:30. This is the rebate amounts. I think, and Chris, you can chime in as well here. I think the sentiment of the committee was people won't be incentivized to do this for the lower rebate amounts. For a staff perspective, as we have a limited pool of money. And our rebates, the rebates being proposed by planning were higher than almost every other public utility in the state. And I know we're expensive up here, but we're also very small.
so, electric HVAC, heat pump, HVAC, electric, heat pump, water heater, range oven, clothes and dryer, the last three, are two of them conversion to electric? And refrigerator is just a more efficient, like Energy Star appliance? What's the criteria for the last three?
So because we allow electric to electric, if they had an electric range, they could do a more efficient electric range. If they had electric clothes dryer, they could do a more efficient clothes dryer. That was that prior one on electric to electric. So that could be the same, or it could be fuel switching from propane to electric. Either one would qualify for the rebate.
I mean, it seems like for the last three, it might be hard to prove there's an improvement. I mean, it seems like you could say you have to install an Energy Star approved appliance, but I don't know that I could give you the energy efficiency of, a 15-year-old appliance to show improvement, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's actually shockingly easy.
Yeah.
You can actually go Google the old Energy Star efficiencies on old ones. Now, 15 years ago, there wasn't as much Energy Star, but
There was a lot.
yeah, but there was some. So I think I did go back and Google some old stuff to see how easy it would be to compare Energy Star ratings, and it really wasn't that difficult as long as I got the serial number or the model number for the respective piece of equipment.
That's surprising.
Nothing ever goes away on the internet, John.
I'm in a tough spot here because on these points, I recall the committee having very strong and opinions and relatively what seemed to me as well-informed opinions. They are significantly higher in their dollar amounts for the categories that matter most. The heat pump HVAC is the biggest one, and they're two times, if not 3 times or 2.5 times higher in their dollars per ton and their maximums. In my notes from committee, people like Ann Fleur, Preston, Eric would have gone as high as 500 per ton with a max of 2,500 per install. I feel that if I support staff recommendation, that is simply disregarding strong views of these committee participants, and I can't support this. I can't vote for this.
Is there a middle ground that you would propose, Chris, that's between these that you can help us get to a more common place on?
Well, in I mean, of course, we could split the difference, but in the 3 or 4 categories that I think in planning committee discussions, we all agreed were most prevalent, most, the largest likely number of applicants and certainly, if you take it by dollar amount, that was the H pump HVAC, that was the hot water heater. We're off by, you can see right here, 2 to 3 times. We're off by 2-3x, and so
Well, just to be clear, we just voted that the second column is already maxed at $1,000, right? We just voted on that.
yeah.
So I mean, I would say that's not even just per column, right? That's summing across
Yeah.
columns. So I would be more open, given that we have a cap of $1,000 per customer, I would be open to having increases in individual amounts that are maybe more towards the planning committee. But I
Yeah.
think just want to make sure you're remembering that
I am
aspect of what we just
following the
voted on.
logic that we've already boxed ourselves in on the HVAC one, so $1,000 eats it all up. And so I have to support larger. I want to support larger numbers for all other categories like fridge, oven, etc.
And just to be clear, the recommended numbers are higher than almost every other public utility in the state. We would have the sweetest energy efficiency rebate program and, the highest rates to go with it, I guess.
Can I
Does
ask
it
one
make a
clarifying?
difference does it make a difference that we are propane, whereas most utilities are not? Does that matter in the consideration?
That doesn't,
PG&E is gas.
Gas, but not propane.
Yeah, yes. Sometimes the propane's cheaper, so that's true.
I don't know. I don't, it's not a rhetorical question. I don't know the answer, whether we should think about ourselves as being a little bit different as a rural utility. When we say gas, we mean propane. I don't know what the implications are and if that matters much when you think about the subsidy program. Also, our numbers are very small, so well, that cuts both ways. I don't know. I'm just conflicted because we're rolling over all the recommendations of volunteer participants in the planning committee.
I mean, just to say it another way, we have the smallest PVC funds of all and these were electric utilities, all the electric utilities in the state, and we have the largest rebates.
Yeah.
So with some exceptions, I mean, there were a couple that were higher than what we're proposing, but adjusted for proportionality between a $300 million annual budget and our $7 million annual electric budget. And so this is dealing only with electricity. The gas point is moot because PVC funds only apply to electric utilities.
Right.
So the gas point is moot.
Can I ask one clarifying thing? Well, it says clothes dryer, but I assume a washing machine would also be in that same column? Or
Nobody had washing machines rebates, not one.
yeah.
So I did not include them.
So that was
Yeah, so the
it was
answer is no,
deliberate.
it really is just clothes dryers.
Okay, all right.
Because I think that in terms of energy they draw is probably de minimis in terms of benefit to the utilities.
Yeah, and a lot of it's minimizing water for those.
Well, is there merit to taking this back to the planning committee one more time? Obviously at the cost of a month's delay, but is there merit to taking it back to them and allowing one more round of their input, or shall we simply vote and present them with a fait accompli?
My opinion is it's been a very long time.
Yeah.
And we're never going to know the right answers unless we actually get some experience. And if we learn that people said, gee, I would have done this if only it were this amount. If we start to hear that, then we reconsider, but we need a starting point.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then we need a learning experience. I mean, so that's the way I think about it.
Okay, yes, and you're certainly right. I mean, I simply inherited this from months of previous work.
Yeah.
I just, and I think we can sell, we can take that message back to the committee. It's good logic. It's based on the assumption that a month's delay would, would have a negative impact, and we don't want to wait any longer. But if we
Well,
say,
it's not just a month's delay, it's also that I think we've been talking about this for years.
it's
And we
crowding
need to
out
get the
other
program out
topics.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
Well, it's
time
not even
to,
probably other topics. It's that I think we need to put a program in practice and see what happens. Like, we will see what happens. If everyone says like this is way too low, none of this is going to motivate me to do anything, then maybe we have to revisit all of our assumptions. Maybe and that might be
Okay.
true.
yeah.
And that's why
and-
I'm very emphasizing this is a first pass. It won't be perfect. I guarantee there are people, we're going to get feedback. Like I already talked extensively about how I think we could potentially have customers frustrated about the way that they can't buy something and then apply. We'll have to revisit this. It's not going to be perfect in possibly many ways. So I don't see it as, let's get something going. Let's see what happens.
right.
See how many people apply.
I follow the logic. I won't vote for it, but I follow the logic and I'll support it with the committee. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to
Well,
approve the
Well,
rebate
I would just say,
amounts?
well, Bob, I would say, is
Yeah.
there a middle ground on like, getting ranges and clothes dryers up to like $100 instead of 50 or electric hot water? I mean, I'm just trying to find, I respect the planning committees.
I appreciate that. I
opinion.
don't recall that any of those lesser items were particularly hot buttons for the committee compared to the heat pump. So I think we keep it where it is and we'll vote where we vote. Can't always be unanimous. Let's keep going.
Right. But then also the max 500 on the central HVAC, is that, I mean, we already have 1,000 as a personal cap. Do we think we need a cap on the max of 1,000?
Eric, wasn't it the case that we said central electric is almost non-occurring? That's very small and
It is a very small, I mean, I think we
Yeah.
could delete the maxes, I think to your point, Doug, I think we could delete those.
Yeah,
And
right.
I don't know, outside of a few homes on the east side, that there'd be a 10-ton unit installed anywhere in Kirkwood.
Right. So I just to simplify this, I would say that let's remove the max from
Yeah.
both of those columns because we already have a max that's applicable.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then I would motion to do that.
Okay, so there's a motion to adopt these rebate amounts with no maximums. Because there's already a total cap.
That's right.
Okay, is there a second? I'll second it.
All right.
Okay,
Epstein,
aye.
Schroeder,
I think we've lost John.
John, are you,
He is not with us. Yeah, we lost John.
okay, keep going then?
Minutes-Ronda,
Aye.
Bucher,
no, nay.
Dornbrook, aye.
Okay, so 3
John
to 1.
just texted me, he's trying to reconnect.
Okay,
Okay.
Do you wanna
why don't we
hold that vote?
hold the vote open while we move on to the next item?
Okay.
And Bob, before we do that, can I just, I want to make one comment. I think, Chris, it's important to me that you made something that I think you said roll over planning committee's recommendations. And I just want to be very clear. I do not see us as doing that as a board. I see us taking recommendations, having discussion, bringing our own thoughts and feelings towards this and trying to make a good decision. So I feel very strongly that this isn't like us trying to not take in just the community's feedback. And I just want to make sure that that's noted from my own personal perspective, because I heard you say that, and I just want to make sure that you hear that
I note that I could have done and should have done more since our committee meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago, and now to broker consensus. We had an email exchange, as Eric mentioned, and I just suspect that to come back to the committee, again, I'm thinking Preston, Ann Flores, and Eric Rickert, and simply say that on several counts, we simply staff told us at the time that they had different views on dollar amounts and maximum amounts and how much we should spend on the total program, et cetera. There were differing views, but on every single view, we voted staff recommendation and against committee members, and the difference was significant. And you can see it here. And so I should have done a better job of staying in touch leading up to this meeting and this vote. But it's done, so your point is noted.
Thanks.
And John's on now, Bob.
Okay. So John, we were just doing a vote on the recommended rebate amounts. There's a motion to approve the staff amounts with the maximums removed since they're already covered by the $1,000 per person cap. So,
Well, not really. I mean, that changes the meaning of the first column.
yes, it does make the first column larger.
Okay, so there's a motion.
Yeah, there's a motion and there's a vote. So far it's 3-1 and we're waiting for your vote.
Aye, sorry. Yeah, the storm has caused Xfinity to keep crashing at my house. So.
Yeah. Yep.
What's crashing into his house?
Infinity, the storm.
Oh,
Yeah, we were without electricity for 2 days and we were out of internet or Xfinity for 2 days and now it just dropped again. So I'm tethered off my phone.
Okay, well, we appreciate the effort. Okay, thank you everybody then for this item, and it's been 2 years and we're ready to learn something and move on.
So I anticipate, we'll be able to work on getting the forms, and I will probably come back to communications, Doug, just for the advertisement portion of it, but the formulaic stuff, I'll get all that pulled together. So we might be able to start advertising this, late spring and have it ready to go by July 1st, and everybody can apply and be ready for it and be prepared and hit the ground running. So just keep that in the back of mind for communications and our timing, Doug, to add to our list.
Thank you. I've made note of
Maybe a
that. for
challenge
communications.
educating the public
Yeah.
on all the ins and outs of this.
So make it as simple as possible. Flow charts are really wonderful, I think. So.
Okay, so item F, temporary advisory committee report.
So Doug and Rick, do you guys want to drive this? And
Yeah, I'll get it started. And Rick certainly, as my partner on all this is, will certainly chime in. But just to set the stage so that everyone kind of remember where we are on the temporary advisory committee. We had our event in December, as hopefully everyone remembers, quite a successful event, I think. And that, as we discussed at our last board meeting in January, our goal is to have a survey out in front of our customers. So then that way the temporary advisory committee can make recommendations to the board, given that whatever the survey results come back with at the March meeting. So what you are seeing in the board packet today, starting on section 62, is the page 62 is the survey that we would propose to send, along with the couple pages after that is a supplemental document that we would be sending to customers. And from the board's perspective, I think what you want to be thinking about is, if these questions were answered in a certain way, whatever way they're answered, will this help you make a decision as to how we would want to proceed as a board in the future on potentially funding options or service options for the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department. And so that's what the survey is intended to do, is hopefully answering the questions. So if you, this is your chance as a board member and the community members on the call today to provide that feedback, because what we will be doing in the next week, hopefully, is if there aren't substantive and massive changes, perhaps get this out into the customers' hands so that we can get those results back and then get that recommendation to the board. I will apologize in advance. I did notice in reviewing the board packet, some of the FAQ questions had like double periods, and I saw that there's a sentence that kind of ended at a colon in a few places, and I apologize for that. We had 11 people on the committee, and we're all working collaboratively in Google Docs and trying to revise and approve edits. So that sort of stuff will have to get reviewed before this gets finally published. So I apologize for those sorts of mistakes and edits that are existing today, and those will get cleaned up before it goes out. But I want to highlight just appreciate the work that the community has been doing. Like I said, the 11 people in the committee have been very forthright in their time and effort to make this happen. And the goal for this conversation is to get your feedback so that I can take that with Rick back to the committee and make any changes necessary before this goes out to the community. Are there any questions on that?
How do you propose to put the FAQ and of course the survey in front of people? This will be mailed to them, the two documents together, or what?
I envision that what would happen is, we typically send a link for our biannual survey that we would send. It would go out in a similar electronic format to the email addresses that we have for each account. And then inside of the survey, my vision would be that there would be a link inside the survey that has a link, and we can post the FAQ on the KMPUD website.
I'll
Excellent.
just add on to that. Typically, what we've done is there's an email inviting them to take the survey. The email has some introductory. It would have a link. Please read the FAQ before you take the survey. As I take the survey, and then the survey would be tested to make sure we only receive one per household.
You answered a question I was about to ask. Thank you.
Yeah. So I just want to say, I think this is really excellent work. And I know it's taken a lot of time and period, but I think this is really good. And I think knowledge has grown quite a bit. I have two suggestions on the survey. The first one on question 6, I don't know if anybody actually knows what they currently pay per month for their fire assessment. So I would suggest that either in the email or in the survey that we actually show what that household is currently paying. So this isn't them guessing what it is, but they would say, if this is what you're voting for, this is how much you would be paying. Because I don't know that too many people, we took a survey right now. I don't know if anybody knows what their current payment is.
So you would do
Because they
that
don't
in
know
the
their square
inter-
footage,
What?
Yeah,
because they don't know their square footage.
It's on their monthly bill.
it's combustible space, not just your square footage. So it's actually a different number. But
Yeah.
you would put it on the FAQ, Bob, is what you're saying. You currently pay this much,
Yeah. I
Bob.
would make sure
Well,
that the amount is actually visible to the customer.
But I just want to be very clear, because Eric, an FAQ would be general, but I think, Bob, what you're saying is specific to a customer for every
Yes.
unique link sent
The
out.
email asking them to take the survey would have their data on it.
Okay.
Wow.
And the only thing I would say on this one, Bob, to correct it is that charge is not correct. That charge is the Amador County side, not the Alpine County side. There's two different charges per square footage based on which county you're in.
The 4 cents is Amador?
I believe that's
Oh,
Alpine. Amador's it's 8.1 cents or 8.2. Yeah, 8.1. Rick says 8.1. So they'll just need to clean that up too.
Thanks for that catch.
And the percentages would grow proportionally? Okay.
I think you have
Now, when
the,
I think I understand it, I discover there's a major fact that I don't understand.
And the
Uh,
customers are currently billed per month.
Per month, yeah.
Per month.
So if you
That's fine.
wanted to know what your annual is, you just multiply it by.
Yeah, I would just do the annual.
You're right. Yeah, we'll just give them their annual.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Just
Yeah, but you're right. It is on our bill by month. Absolutely right.
Yeah. So anyway, I would make that suggestion. And then the other one I would make is on question 8, one funding strategy is to raise utility rates. I think the question at the end should be, would you support raising your utility rates to fund the fire department? Because it's one for one. It isn't, if we raise somebody else's utility rates, then you would pay less for fire. It's your, it would be allocated differently, but your rate, do you want to pay higher utility rates to avoid it? So I think it should be more explicit. That should be more explicit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think, 8, we need to have something similar to what's in 6, so they get a feel for what the dollar impact would be. You know, if you have to raise, you know, let's say for the $1 million option, you have to raise an additional $665,000, right? So if you added that to the utilities, what percentage increase is that? And then would we have to incorporate that into rate studies for each utility?
Yes.
Yeah, John, I think I'll say that the reason why we didn't do it that way, or the intent, I think, is that it's a vehicle that we could or could not use or investigate. And I guess the question that my intent or our committee's intent was more of, it's a lever, and it's a 0 to something less than 980,000-ish a year that we could play with. And we've talked about it, I think, at the last meeting, that, there are responsible, I'm using air quotes as responsible, ways that we could use property taxes that are easier and that make more sense to go into a rate study. There are ones that we might not want to ever do, and so we might want to reserve. So I think it's more of a lever. And I guess the question that we were trying to answer is, do you support us even investigating, as a board, investigating this as a lever? Or do you say, look, our rates are too expensive as it is, and I just don't want to see any rate increases whatsoever. Go fund this through a square footage. And that's kind of the intent here, not so much to figure out how much of the lever is someone willing to use. It's more of the binary. Do you have interest in us investigating this as an option? That was the intent.
I think it needs more clarity that, a portion up to this amount of money could be funded through increased utility rates, and that would increase your utility rate by a certain percentage.
I see.
The only problem with that is each one of these 4 has completely different rate structures, and you couldn't say 4% in electric is different because of consumption versus 4% in water. They're not equal to.
It's also, to do 4 rate studies, it'd take us, 4 years to get it implemented.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I don't want to try to quantify it. That's just
Well,
too hard, given the time frame. So I just want the
Well,
question be, would you consider having higher your utility rates going up in order to free up property taxes to fund the fire department at some unknown amount?
Well, we felt like it was important to give cost estimates on square footage, so I don't understand why it's not important to give a cost estimate on a utility increase. I mean, it doesn't logically follow for me, but if you don't want to do it, don't do it.
Well, all right, if we look at page 69, because this is my second point. This is where taxes went in the last fiscal year. So we can't take money out of fire and give it back to them. That's not available. Parks, it's the only way to fund it. So you have these other areas, of which the largest one is electric, and the actual budget for electric, I'm doing this from memory, is 200,000 of property taxes, and it's higher if there's an issue with electric, and the only way to meet the mortgage is either to take it out of property taxes or do an instantaneous rate increase to cover it. So in all practicality, I believe the only real opportunity is $200,000 in electric that would be done through a rate increase. But I don't want to,
That's kind of what I was kind of heading toward, was 2 different things on 6 and 8. And actually, before I do that, I do think the entire package is really well done. So of course, we're only picking on a couple of things we don't like. So thanks to Doug and to Rick and everybody else. But that's why I think 8's kind of misleading, because you are saying you could raise somewhere from 0 to 200,000 or 0 to 450,000 or something like that from property tax. You can't fund the whole program through property tax. And so then I would probably give an example. If this was raised by an increase to electricity, it would be this percentage increase, then people get some feel for the magnitude, and also it's not gonna solve the problem. Because somebody could answer this and think, oh yeah, raise utility rates and and then use the property taxes, and that's not gonna fund the program for really any of the use cases, right? Except for.
Yeah, I'm just really nervous about trying to be specific without doing a lot more analysis. And I think what Doug's asking for is to say, one funding strategy that would cover a portion of the cost would be to increase utility rates so they're less dependent on property taxes.
Yeah, I think if you say a portion, and I would say I'd give some range. I
Okay,
mean,
Eric has a thought he wants to add in.
Maybe the better way to do it, John, instead of adding analysis in 8, except for the changing the question as Bob suggested, is to remove the analysis in 6. Instead of putting numbers to it, the first bullet would say, no change. Please see your email for your current annual assessment. Would you be willing to increase it 2.5 times, 5 times, 10 times, and forget all the other garbage behind it?
I mean, kind of the problem with 6 and 8 is, first of all, you don't know you can do 6, so you're giving them an option that you might not be able to do. And 8 might imply that it's going to fund the program, and we know it can't fund the program. So unless somebody reads the FAQ and has more knowledge, they might figure that out. But if somebody just goes through and clicks on the questionnaire and answers 6 and 8, their responses are potentially going to be misleading. Because if you do a 218, the 218 engineering report may not assign benefit by square footage.
Yeah, that's explained in the FAQ.
I know, but what if somebody doesn't spend all the time to read the whole FAQ and understand it? And it's kind of an obtuse topic anyway. Like the 218 process is just kind of bizarre. So I just wouldn't want to mislead them that, oh, we'll just change the square footage and that would fund it. Or, hey, we'll just raise utility rates when we couldn't raise enough. We couldn't use enough property tax to fund the programs. Is that? So I think we could get some false answers. You know, somebody would really say, yeah, I really like 6. Then we do a 218. It comes back and it says proximity to the fire department, open space versus a lot versus a condo versus a house is different. You know what I mean?
John, but how about if just on the wording on 6,
Yes or no?
if theoretically, if the funds to cover, because we've asked them what level they want,
Yeah.
just say if meeting the level in your, whatever you said, you can actually do this and you can say, given that level, if we had the ability to pay it entirely out of square footage, which we probably don't, it would mean this amount to you. Are you still willing to go with that or something like that?
What if we just made it exactly like 8? Would you be willing to increase your annual assessment to pay for fire based on the level of service you selected in number 5? Then 6 and 8 would be apples to apples, John, and it would take away speculation on, this or, this amount of money, that amount of money. You could just say yes or no, because 8 is just a yes or no. Would you be willing to increase your utility rates to support this? Would you be willing to increase your?
I probably like 6 more than 8, because it gives some quantification and it could fund the whole program, where 8 can't fund the whole program no matter what.
Right.
So if somebody answers yes, do it through electric rates, we're going to be going back to them saying, well, we could do a small part of it through electric rates.
Okay, then the real problem with 6 is that an actual 218 study might not allow us to do it this way.
Correct.
So this is hypothetical in how it would be allocated across customers. Why don't we just repeat that? Repeat that information.
Bob, are you saying that a 6 with its fire assessment is more difficult to implement administrative and legally, or than 8 to do it through county tax?
No. All we're saying is that the 218 process might not allow a uniform allocation of cost per square foot.
I see.
I think would help with 6 is if you just put some of the FAQ text in that question. So if somebody doesn't read the FAQ, at least they read.
Yeah, because
kind
I
of
think the FAQ covers it. It
Yeah, so I
says,
think, I know it'll be a long question. I think what I'm concerned about is some people don't read the FAQ and they answer the questionnaire. So if we could just take some of the FAQ clarification about square footage and put it in that
Okay.
question 6.
Or you could just point to it in the question, please see FAQ number 7 or whatever.
I'd like to see it there because I just don't, I
That's
think
fine.
people just,
That's fine. It just makes the questions very verbose, like a lot of my questions. But seriously, would a homeowner or a ratepayer be forgiven for sort of thinking, I would much rather have a fire assessment, which is direct, as opposed to having the money go to, come back from Alpine and Amador counties, because as we say so often in the FAQ, that is murky. We don't get a lot of it back. For every $10 they raise taxes, we get only $2 back or whatever it happens to be. I would imagine a lot of people would have a starting bias that says, I don't trust tax coming back.
yeah, the thing is it's kind of the normal way you pay for fire services.
Yeah, but so much in Kirkwood with respect to our county partners is not normal.
the
Well, I mean, we
numbers
have
we get, the numbers we get in
the law-
property taxes, I'm sorry, the
the
amount we get in
law-
property taxes is very reliable.
Yeah, it is. It's very reliable. It's just limited. So the flaw
Yeah,
would be-
well,
The
yeah,
concept of it going up is fantasy. The amounts we get are very predictable and reliable.
Yeah, so the
they're
flaw with
predictable and
eight is
yeah, okay, they're
they
predictable and
partially-
reliable, but they're not, they're not 100%. They're a fraction. And that is, is
Yeah,
it
but the
6?
fraction is completely reliable.
Yeah,
Okay,
we just have to state that it could partially fund and put some upper limit on what it could fund, so someone doesn't get confused that we could raise utility rates and cover all the programs, right? We could raise up to whatever you want to pick, 200,000 or 450,000 in electricity rate. We could pull up to 200 or up to 450,000 from property tax if we increase
Okay.
utility rates.
Can we try
I
to,
apologize for wordsmithing here, but on number 8, even the wording that says property taxes we receive from the county, I mean, the county does not pay taxes to PUD. So even that needs to be a little bit edited because it's property taxes that we pay to the county that get returned to us. And that needs to be clarified, please.
rely less on our property taxes that are refunded from Amador and Alpine?
Refunded, returned.
All 3
received
counties,
back,
by the way.
something
All
like
3
that.
counties.
It's all 3 counties because there's El Dorado also.
Eldorado
Yeah.
does give us some.
Can I try to summarize where we are in the interest of time? I think in 6, we want to make it clear that the increases that we drawn some data from the FAQ to make it clear that a straight multiplier on square footage may not be what a 218, what we're allowed to do, something like that, and to make it that's what we want to do there, and make sure that they understand what they currently pay, either through the email or probably through the email is the simplest way to do it. And then on 8, to make it clear that a portion of what we need to fund the fire department could come by raising utility rates, relieving some amount of pressure on property taxes that could then go to the fire department. Would you want to have your utility rates go up to do this?
Would you be willing to put in, could a certain upper limit dollar amount that we could get out of property tax?
I personally think it's 200,000. It's probably the max.
Yeah, see, that's what I think is kind of important here, because we need another way to raise money besides property tax, no matter what, and I think that it would clarify it.
I would defer to staff's opinion as well, but 200 is my opinion.
I would, I mean, going back to what we said we were gonna do in the water wastewater rate study. And, that relied on, I think, 200 or 250. I'm with you. It's one of those two, but I'm not positive which one. So somewhere between 200 and 250 is what we used in that to use in the water wastewater rate study to say we were going to commit this much, which is how we got funding from USDA. And obviously we're violating that promise to USDA with what we had to do this year because of how
Right.
high we had to go to property tax. So I would say between 200 and 250. I would be comfortable that that's the right number.
Okay. So how do we,
So if it said something like, and Chris, I know your comment about refunding, I haven't wordsmithed that exactly, but would you support raising utility rates in order to free up refunded property taxes from the counties to fund a portion of, up to about $250,000 per year to fund the fire departments, like something along those lines?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And then just on the number 6 part, what you want to say is more of a hedge of that this may or may not be the actual thing that we can do, but given that this is what we have today, this is what you would be looking at. Is that essentially what I'm
yeah,
understanding?
and
Yeah,
these line
yeah,
up,
put some-
these line up with the columns, don't they? The 5, 10, and 15 or 16?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it is just putting in some caveat around the 218 benefit received.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And
So-
anything on the actual FAQ directly then? Outside other than the survey?
I have that one suggestion on the FAQ, and that is on electric.
Page are we up?
This is page 69. The 450, it is true that that's what happened, but I think it's a fair number to say the budgeted to electric is 200K. That's what's in the rate study. And if you want to explain that, that's how we cover our, we also use it to cover our mortgage. That's our risk money for covering the mortgage.
Mhm.
And if we didn't cover it through property taxes, we would have to do an instantaneous rate increase.
Cover deterioration.
Your
Yeah.
main point there is that the $200,000 difference is what you were referring to earlier, in that electric is higher in this 1 year because of the thing that we voted on in December, basically.
Yes, that's right.
that should not be a persistent thing anymore, within range, at least a smaller range.
Right.
So that's the point of that. Okay, I understand. I see what your point is. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I thought the rest of it was really, really good. I had no suggestions.
Does the FAQ make clear a lot of the points that came through in the meeting in December around volunteer personnel and their qualifications? I guess this is a question maybe for Rick, that some of our volunteers may be staffed but aren't able to respond to certain fire scenarios, that some of our medical personnel can't administer certain medical procedures. That was very impactful to hear in the December meeting. Does it come through in this FAQ? Maybe I missed it.
It's right in question 4.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Question.
it comes through in the survey, but not necessarily in the FAQ, but we're also gonna link with this community notice or letter going out, a link to the forum so people could watch the forum and be better educated as well. So there'll be a way for them to capture that. The one thing that wasn't captured in the FAQ was something that came out in the forum was, what do other similar departments, agencies do currently now? How are they being funded and so forth? And we're behind the scenes working on that. We've got a couple examples, but it wasn't enough to, we didn't have enough information to provide in the FAQ draft that you see today.
Yeah,
We can certainly add it later.
I would advocate.
Well, Rick, we do have that one question on page 66. That's one that we have some examples of, like Eastern Alpine and Bear Valley,
Yeah.
but there are other
You had a couple more that came out in the last committee meeting
Okay.
as well. But I think it's nice to have those because they're local and relatable.
Yeah,
to us.
that's good.
My sense from the December meeting was that some of the biggest ahas that the community, that the attendees walked away with from your presentation, Doug and Rick, was that, what it really means to rely on volunteer staffers and a volunteer chief, and all the shortcomings of that. And the second aha, as I said a minute ago, was that even when we are fortunate to have people, staffers, firefighters, able to answer calls, they're often not allowed, not qualified, not certified to take actions that we sort of assume they can. I think those ahas that there were many attendees at the meeting. It was well attended and well promoted, but a lot of people didn't come. And so I would put more of that into this FAQ. Just advice at this late date.
Okay, so you have the feedback you need, Doug, to proceed?
I think so. Chris, can you just say again, I'm trying to take notes. I'm gonna make sure I captured the things that you said. It's the ability, like the people ability to serve when they are called, and
well,
what was the other one?
Yes, I mean, many of us were at the meeting, sorry to recap, but just the idea that 20 years ago, a volunteer fire department meant different things than what it actually is today. These are the shortcomings of relying on volunteer staffers in Valley and Kirkwood and a volunteer chief. And that was a real eye opener for attendees, as I heard feedback afterwards. And the other one was that both in medical scenarios and in firefighting scenarios, like firefighters not able to enter a building or a second floor of a building, or there were examples given like that were real. They were jaw-dropping for some in the audience, that, oh my goodness, it's hard enough just to get somebody in the truck and staffed in the position, and sometimes when they go out there, they can't do things I would assume a firefighter can do. And so that is the reality.
Everything froze on our end. No idea why.
It's all frozen.
Everything's frozen. It's like,
Back. It's back. My internet's working.
we're
Yeah,
back. We
it's
had an
back.
issue with the internet. Apologies.
Oh, okay. I was just saying, Chris, you had a thought before we wrap up, or what were you gonna say, Chris?
This jumps ahead to other committees, in particular Communications Committee updates, but one topic there is the creation of FAQs for each utility service. So there will be several other FAQs coming, and I just want to make a note that if this is the first one that we launch into the community, that we have some sort of standard and consistency as to what an FAQ is. I think this is a tremendous list of questions and very good work. But we do want it to be a consistent standard. We don't want to come out with snow removal and propane and other FAQs that are awkwardly different.
Noted,
Just a
thank you.
note.
Appreciate that. And Bob, just what I was saying before we were wrapping up the topic was just saying thank you again to the committee members who put this together, and Rick in partnership and leading the committee there, and all the people involved. So thank you to everyone, and thanks for the board's feedback.
Right. So Doug, you feel like you have very good, well-defined boundaries from the board to operate within and not color outside the lines? You go good?
I think so. I mean, two of the questions and then a couple of items on the FAQ. So I think other than that, I'll work on that this weekend, and the committee is planning to meet on Monday. So in preparation of feedback from the board here, and then our goal will to be then send this out to the community next week.
Wow, good.
Just one small point on the questionnaire, items 7 and 8. I think we need to make sure that the circles on yes and no are the same size.
Yes.
This will go into a Survey Monkey and it will be formatted all perfectly here. This was just a lot of cooks in the kitchen, I think, is what happened.
Yeah, there was a couple of those in the FAQ as well. There's some formatting things that I will go through this weekend.
Size of the circle
Clean
sounds
up.
suggestive of the answer we
Well,
required.
yeah. It grabs your eyes, so it's funny.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, just a little sidebar. What time on Monday do you want to have this meeting? I know that we didn't connect, but I need to
Yes.
get Chris to send that out right now before he leaves.
I think we typically did 3 o'clock. That should work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
3 o'clock, you say?
Yes, we'll send you an invite.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the major projects update.
Not a whole lot going on here. I will say that we, as Brandy reported, we did finally get back from Dave Rightly, Electric Master Plan updated draft with some of the requests from the board. So that's moving forward, and nothing's really changed on this except for we dropped the needs assessment because it is done. So that disappeared.
Okay, and you're happy with the progress on the treatment plant?
I was going to go over that separately.
Separately,
Like on the GM
okay,
report,
good.
but yes, I
Yeah.
am happy in short.
Okay, then why don't we hear about that in the general manager's report?
Sure. So a couple things to report on. So the wastewater treatment plant is going well. Most of the work is occurring inside. We've had 2 change orders to date, which incorporate multiple items. Mostly when we ripped out the walls, we found rotted wood, or the doors could not be reinstalled and we had to do new doors. De minimis things like that. So 2 executed change orders, both for around $25,000 each, which is well within our contingency so far. But the contractor is proceeding. So any new questions on wastewater?
Yeah, sorry, just a question from a newbie here. In the chart, why is it that wastewater has blue for planning in Q3, Q4? I just don't understand how to interpret that chart. And then, of course,
So if you look at the legend, Chris, the legend that's right in there, blue is
Planning.
planning, yellow, orange is design, yellow is bid construction.
So I don't know a lot about the wastewater project. Hasn't it been planned and isn't it underway right now?
Yeah, it's all yellow. It's all bid construction. It's all
I'm
yellow.
looking at
That's a
master
different-
plan wastewater.
That's the master plan. That has nothing to do with the wastewater plan.
Oh, forgive me.
It's all right. You're still learning.
Oh, yeah. I have 4 years to catch up. Let's see. So what do those
20.
blue marks mean
Blue means planning.
for the master plan? Okay,
So
that's
it's a
not-
planning document.
okay,
And then this is orange is design and yellow is construction.
okay. So
But no design or construction necessarily comes out of the master plans. They're just a planning document.
I see. So the fact that our our big $7 million, $6-7 million wastewater project is underway, I shouldn't expect to track that in that little chart.
It's right here.
It's the last row.
It's literally right there.
Oh, WWTP. Okay, wastewater. Oh, thank you. Yeah, okay. Failure to read acronyms. That makes it hard to talk to young people also. WWTP, got it. Thank you.
Okay.
So the water master plan, we've put out a request for proposal. It looks like we have 3 or 4 of the 6 interested and should be proposing that we'll get those next week. The propane master plan, I'm supposed to get a scope. I'm waiting on that from Stantec. And then the only other thing to announce is we did an internal advertising for a water wastewater project manager. The interview committee, Rick, Brandy, and John Campbell recommended Baron Burge, and I concurred with the recommendation, and he accepted the position effective last week.
So that's an internal promotion.
That's an internal promotion. Yeah, that's all I had.
Who are the wastewater managers at this point?
There's only one,
Oh. Okay.
Baron Burge.
Whom does that person replace?
No one. It was a new position. It was
Oh,
created and advertised internally.
thank you.
Okay, Rick, operations?
For operations, snow removal. Start there. Per the recent NOAA, weather station snowpack report for the end of January, basically we're at 50% of average, which was a stark contrast to the same date of last year, where the Sierra snowpack was around 180 to 255%. So this, along with the districts maintaining good staff levels, have really no major snow removal equipment issues this season, along with the addition of the mid-sized blower. Our snow removal team's been able to keep up with the storms, even though the storms seem to want to hit during the weekends when everybody wants to come. But having, the addition of the 2 loaders and staff that can work the loaders to trim the pack off the roads, you'll notice in a lot of our contracts, we get down to basically road base, which is really, in the long run, makes it safer for everybody as there's less ice buildup and it melts out quicker, meaning we spend less time out there. So it's been a really great thing. But moving forward, we'll continue to send out community snow removal notices like we did last week when we think or hear there might be a big storm, so we can remind homeowners that we'll prioritize the roads first and then expand out and do parking pads and driveways second. And also run the evening or night shift. We had several night shifts in this last storm cycle. And that only helps the community because we're out there, it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night and later. It also allows us to not flex our staff a little bit so they're not working over 10-hour days, essentially, trying to keep an eye on the payroll. So overall, things are going good, and I've had some pretty good reports. We've had a few people complain, kind of the same people making comments like you need to get a little close to the stake. But overall, things have been going pretty well. We'll try to keep the momentum going for the balance of the year. Our last big hurdle is going to be President's Weekend, and so we'll certainly get ready for that. So that's snow removal, unless there's any questions from the board.
I don't think so.
Moving on to propane. With the lack of road closures this year, again, associated with the weather, and also being able to receive propane from 2 different suppliers, we've been really able to keep our propane levels up to where we'd like to keep them. And for example, yesterday we received 2 propane trucks getting ready for the weekend. And so things are looking good there as well. And the suppliers, we're not getting the complaints like we did last year where the drivers weren't interested in driving through snowstorms and chaining up. It's just complete 180, plus the supply on the market's much better. So overall, things are going well with propane. We did have an issue that I'm glad you don't know about because it would have been horrible. But last week we had one of our vaporizers, which is the device that creates and stabilizes the pressure in the system. One of the motors just failed. It just died. But staff was able to make a quick repair and get it repaired within 48 hours. So you never saw system loss or any issues with our propane system. But moving forward, we're going to try to maybe capitalize a third vaporizer to replace some of the water baths, some of the older equipment that we have in the shed near our propane tanks, and basically build one more layer into the system because our 2 current vaporizers are 10 and 12 years old and they're starting to show their age a little bit. But I appreciate staff doing such a great job switching that out, getting the new motor in and making it happen without.
So we can maintain pressure with just one.
We can. Okay. But it's nice to have the redundancy.
Sure.
And then, valving. It's complicated, but it's not. But staff was right on. So it's nice to be able to say that. Really have no other reports other than one for the summer festival and one for solid waste. For solid waste, if you haven't already noticed, all the dumpsters are painted green at the where we keep the dumpsters at the treatment plant. There's no more blue only recycling containers. We did that for an operational change. It allows us to be more flexible, especially in the holiday period when people are bringing everything to the yard. We can have more than just 2 blue dumpsters. We can create 3 or 4 recycled dumpsters only. So it's a cost-effective way of basically managing the solid waste. And then moving forward, we'll continue doing repairs and making sure the dumpsters work properly, that the counterweight is right, so the customers can lift up the lids and not have to hurt their backs. And then as
Yeah.
everybody has probably done once or twice. The ash bin's been working really well. We haven't had a knock on wood, a dumpster fire in the last year and a half because of the way we're doing the ashes. And we're also grateful for ACES. They're gonna provide some additional forks that we can use in our loaders so we can move the bins out to clean the snow between each bin. That also is a counterweight issue. If the bins get put back on snow, pretty soon the weight in the back of the dumpster basically messes with the counterweight on the lid. So thanks to ACES for providing that device. It's on its way and hopefully we'll get it soon. But that's the update on solid waste. And then
Rick,
finally,
could I
yeah,
come back to propane real quick? And this is something that we talk about in communications committee also, but I've advocated before that in the newsletter, for example, the most recent one, we had quite a lot to say about propane, but one thing we did not say, and I think the market wants to hear, is our propane readiness. And it's a good news story. It's everything you just pointed out, that we're on much stronger footing than we were a year ago. And I've said before, I think we should say this, concerns about jinxing or voodoo or whatever that, I think I would disregard and let people know the steps we've taken so that we've not had this problem and don't anticipate this problem this year.
yeah, we can certainly add a paragraph in the next newsletter article that'll come out probably Monday or Tuesday next week. So we can add that, no problem.
Thank you.
Kirkwood Summer Festival. So recently on January 19th, the Kirkwood Summer Festival Committee held its first meeting for the year. And the tentative scheduled date for the event will be Saturday, July 6th, with the 4th of July, as I mentioned, probably in the previous meeting, hitting on the midweek. We've moved it to the 6th. And new this year, we're pleased to announce that Jennifer Herber is with KCA is graciously offered to take over the event with keeping in mind 100% of the proceeds for the event are still going to go to the fire department. This means that the fire department, the district, will no longer be a special event planner organization. Will be a support role to Jennifer and her staff. And
Does that make you sad?
it does not make me sad.
Okay, just checking.
But the committee, the fire department is fully committed to support Jennifer, the KCA, with event planning, marketing, fundraising, and of course, volunteer support. And I should note, we also like to thank Vail Resorts Epic Promise Grant Giving Council for the total in-kind grant for this year's event of $18,700. So without Vail coming in and offering that grant, this would be a very different event and very difficult to really make any money on. So we'll on the district side, the fire department side, will continue to market, send out donation request letters. It's up to Jennifer whether she'd like to have a silent auction or expand the event or contract the event, but we're excited to have someone who will not only be hosting the Kirkwood Summer Festival, but also including new events for next summer, or bringing back some older events next summer. And I'll let her announce those things as we go along, and possibly the circus again at Labor Day. That was a great event that she put together. And
It was.
Yeah.
So
That was cool.
we're excited to work with her and the KCA with this. But the only other thing I should add about the Summer Festival is we did briefly discuss what the big fundraising ask will be for the fire department this year. And as you know, we focus mostly on equipment. And this year, with our new fire truck that we're slowly getting put together and in service, we really would like to get some battery-powered extrication tools that are much more user-friendly than the ones that we have now, which are hydraulic and over 15 years old. And those tools, the complete set, the brackets and everything that you need to put it on a truck are between $45,000 and $55,000. And so I will not only ask the community for the donation, but I'll also run with an AFG grant for the same item as well as some PPE. So again, I think those are good goals for the event this year and a good ask. So more to be.
Are we allowed to extract people from the vehicles or
We
you have,
do it on every call.
okay.
Some are more
There's no
complicated.
special training it's involved in that.
There is, but typically, if we don't have individuals capable or qualified or certified to do the work, having the tools in place when the next
Fine.
person comes along where they can grab it and go is just super beneficial. So, but for a lot of things like popping a door or taking out a windshield, we can do in-house. It's when we start pulling dashes and doing some of the complicated things, especially with electric vehicles. That's when things get really interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So simple hydraulics aren't the way to go anymore in terms of like wedging stuff.
They still work great,
Okay.
but the handheld portable devices are much easier and benefit the firefighter when you're going over the bank 30, 40 feet. So
Okay.
You know, that might be something to emphasize. Because we'll be buying those or acquiring those would be something positive. I mean, in terms of medical response,
yeah, we'll certainly bring this through the summer festival marketing.
that's a big concern for a lot of people. Is an ability because of training to do medical response.
I'm going to keep us moving here.
Yeah.
So,
That
okay.
concludes my operation.
Thank you very much.
report. Any questions?
Okay, so standing committee updates, finance? John?
We didn't meet.
Okay. Operations?
Oh, we're gonna meet next week.
Okay. Planning? Any
Planning
update, Chris?
committee, am I on mute? No.
Nope. we
Planning
can hear
committee
you.
met, as I referred earlier, 3 weeks ago, and we meet again, next week. With the lengthy discussion we had about the subsidy program, that item, I presume, now falls almost completely off the agenda. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I assume that this committee does not monitor how that rolls out, or do we?
No, it's the board's taking action, so it's done now. So it's off of
That's-
planning's plate.
That's what I thought. What we want to bring to the board meeting next month is our proposal for the low income program, which has been on the agenda again, something that I inherited, but months and months of work precedes this and discussion. So we want to finalize that and bring it to a vote next month at this board meeting. So that'll be on our agenda. And then I propose that perhaps Peter and I arrange a phone call with you, Eric, and talk a little bit about how we set agenda priorities for the months ahead. In keeping with the charter did not change, but we now need to get on to new agenda items, not just carry over from last year. Eric, does that sound sensible that we have a call like that in the maybe next week?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there, should I even raise the question here of what the board thinks need to be planning agenda items, or
Well,
maybe?
it's not on our agenda, so we can't really
Okay.
discuss it, but if you want to have that be a discussion for the next month, then we can add it.
Why
We
don't we
can't
simply
discuss
take
it
a
now.
next step that Peter and I set up a call with Eric?
Okay, sounds good. Okay, communications?
Yep, I just wanted to show one new thing that is relevant to, in addition to what is in the packet. We met yesterday. We're a little bit off schedule until the board meeting comes up and changes in, I guess, in May. So we met yesterday, and I just wanted to highlight what we're talking about. And we've put together a roadmap where we spent a lot of our time yesterday, and this will be a part of the communications committee reports going forward, is what we're doing and what's been done. So we've been working, and done is by the committee's perspective, not the full board. So we as a committee have looked at the general protocols and procedures. Because the board has made this a priority in the general manager's objectives, that's going to be a focus for staff. But I think the committee members do believe that having FAQs, somewhat similar to the TAC ones we just discussed earlier are important to have as well. And so we're starting to work on those in parallel, assigned to committee members. So we're having separate individual committee members starting to work on FAQs in parallel to the staff works on the policies and procedures. And so this is stuff that you will start seeing coming out, and we're trying to put expected completion dates for all of these items. And then we have some things that are kind of below the fold, if you will, that we'll get to. And you'll notice I've added this one already about the energy rebate program that we will add in as a topic for our next meeting.
Wow. Okay. Looks great. Okay, and personnel did not meet. So that covers the standing committees. Temporary Advisory Committee, it was part of the agenda, so that's already covered. There's nothing new on LAFCO that I'm aware of. So is there any general board discussion that a board member wants to bring up? If not, we'll go into closed session. So we first see if there's any items. Okay, for closed session, you should have received the link for my my Zoom, and I'll turn that on shortly. Okay, so we will suspend this meeting and go
Bob,
into
that was sent by email from you, this
No, it
link?
came from Brittany.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Okay, so okay. So I just want to report out from the
Missing Chris. Oh wait, he didn't use the link I sent him. There we go. Everybody's there now.
okay. So I just want to report out from the closed session that regarding labor negotiations, that the board met in closed session and appointed myself and John to negotiate a new contract. So we will arrange a time to talk with you about that.
Sounds good.
And follow up from there. And with that, this meeting's adjourned. I just want to confirm the next two meetings are on the second Friday of the month, and then beginning in May, we'll move to the first Friday of the month.
Correct.
So hopefully everybody has the correct calendar.
Yes. Yes.
It's been challenged.
Yes, I-
And it's updated on the website. Brittany's got it done with the possible exception of the communications timing moved half an hour. And I don't know if she had time to enter that today or not, but everything is
Okay.
current on the calendar.
Okay,
Chris puts out the links, so
Yeah.
it's really helpful because like being on 3 committees is been a challenge.
Yeah. okay,
All right.
good. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. Excellent
nice
snow
weekend,
if you're
all.
Thanks. See ya.
nearby.